So it's been about 20 minutes, and that stuff's been cooling in the desiccator. Should be cool enough, or down to room temperature, so that I can take that out of there and assemble the assembly that we're going to work with. Now, the first step is to clamp the round bottom. And then we'll be putting a Claisen adapter on top of that. Looks like I will need to adjust this a little bit. And then on top of the Claisen adapter, we will have a condenser in the bent neck. And we will have our separatory funnel in the straight neck. And I'm going to twist that. Oops. I'm going to have to tip this the other way. I need to flip that over, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to clamp that properly, because of the way the neck is. It's always a little bit of a logistical challenge. And then the separatory funnel is going to go in the straight neck, so we can drip directly down into the flask. We'll stick that on there in the nut first, and then the O-ring to seal the nut tightly against the glass. The washer first, and then the O-ring, and then the nut. Make that tight enough that it takes a little resistance to turn, and then make sure it's closed so that when I start adding things, it stays in the separatory funnel. And then my two thermometer adapters, which we will attach with cat clips so they don't fall off. And we'll also stick a cat clip on this joint, and a cat clip on this joint. And we can't put one there because there's no space. And then the drying tubes go in. Actually, I should have put the drying tube in first before I attached it, so that any atmosphere that does come into the system has to come through the calcium chloride. So we got a nice sealed up system, and that should be in a good place. I'll turn this on and confirm that I can actually turn the stir bar. It looks like this tripped. So we can actually get that stir bar going. So that assembly looks good. And I'm also going to get out my graduated cylinder, and I can return the crystallizing dish that I had that glassware drying in. I'm going to leave this one in here for now, because that's what I'm going to be using to measure out the 2-methylcyclohexanone, and we're not ready for that yet. So I'll just take this over to the other side of the hood. It's out of the way. Cat clip can go back to the rotovap. So now I want to attach the hoses, and I want to move this as close as I can to the sink, so we don't have very much distance for it to travel. As usual, we've got a weight, so we're going to be sticking one hose on. I guess I should actually put it on the condenser first. Squeeze that on there nicely so it won't come popping off in the middle of the run. that goes to the water inlet. That way it will fill completely. And this one's going to dangle in the sink. And that's why I had to move it close, because the hose isn't that much longer than is necessary. Stick that back there to evaporate. We'll probably use that during the extraction. So I can go ahead and start the water. And actually, I'm going to have to hang that, otherwise it's going to kink. And I have a feeling that's going to come off, so I'm going to run a little trick here. I think this will fit over that. Guess not. There we go. That'll keep that in place. So it actually goes into the sink. Drag this a little forward. That way it won't kink. We can turn on our water flow. And you'll see that the condenser fills. I'm just making sure there are no leaks. I don't want to discover a leak at an inopportune time. So there's our assembly. And now what we need to do is measure out 15 milliliters diethyl ether and put that into the round bottom flask. It's not critical that these measurements be absolutely exact. So we'll take that separatory funnel out. Pour in our ether. We need another 10 milliliters ether, or 5 milliliters ether rather, in there. So I'm going to leave that out for a second, but I will eventually put it back in. And I'm going to make sure my heat is off, and my stirrer, and 300 is a good setting. We don't want that stirring too vigorously. Use tweezers to grab just a single crystal of iodine, these pellets, and add that iodine pellet. And you'll see that that's going to turn the ether a nice orange color as the iodine dissolves. Probably done with that. And now we're going to measure out some magnesium. And smash it up a little. Take a piece of weighing paper. We're only using a small amount of magnesium. And I forgot to bring a scoop. So I'll go get a scoop. So we're measuring out 0.47 grams of magnesium turnings. I obviously dried a lot more than I would need. just in case this reaction doesn't work and I have to run it again. It's a little too much. So that's almost there. See if I can find a really small piece just to get that last little bit. Six. I'll just break that with my fingers. All right, we got 0.475 maybe, 0.478. It's probably actually sucking up a little moisture. 0.479. A little more than we really want. Just break a piece off. All right, 0.467. I'm going to call that good enough. And transfer that to the mortar and pestle. Put this back in there in case I need it later. The Grignard reaction doesn't always work. Sometimes it gets a little moisture in there and it won't start. So I'm just going to break that up a little bit. The goal is to get some fresh surface. But I don't want to do it for too long, because I'm trying not to get any more atmosphere than necessary. Break up some of these big ones. And then we'll transfer that back to our little weighing paper. And remove our separatory funnel. And scoot that magnesium in. And reattach the separatory funnel with the cap clip. So we've got our magnesium in there. Now we can add 5 milliliters of ether to the separatory funnel. And because ether is less dense than bromobenzene, I'm going to add the ether first, so that when I add the bromobenzene, it has to sink down below. That's way too much. Six. The reaction would be too rapid if we added the bromobenzene directly to the magnesium, so we're going to dilute it up with ether. We're also going to be adding the 2-methylcyclohexanone as a solution in ether, so I'm going to put the graduated cylinder back in the desiccator so it stays dry during the 30-minute reflux. And now I need to add the bromobenzene. I'm adding 2 milliliters of bromobenzene. It's 2 syringefuls. air that I need to get out of there first. So we'll do our little drug addict routine here. So there's 1 milliliter. Now I'm going to drip that in. You can see that it goes a little bit cloudy. I'm using the force of the addition to kind of stir it to get it to mix up. And I'll get a 2nd milliliter. Take that back on. Hopefully the bromobenzene itself is fairly dry. If you were doing this in a research environment, you would probably actually distill that bromobenzene, and you might even distill it off some drying agent to make sure the bromobenzene is nice and dry. And often you take the ether and you distill that from sodium metal, and the sodium reacts with any extraneous water. But we're not going to go to those lengths. It's not practical here. So I have my solution of bromobenzene, and I'm going to disassemble that syringe and just let that evaporate in the back of the hood. Got the ether side. Done with the bromobenzene. And I shouldn't need the mortar and pestle anymore. So we're ready to get this reaction started, and what we hope is that as we add the bromobenzene solution to the magnesium reacts with the bromobenzene, the color should fade. We should see it go to a pale yellow, and then there'll be enough heat generated by the reaction of the